Hey, good morning, everyone. This is Steve Kramer. I'm the President and CEO of the Downtown Council, and welcome to our virtual panel on the downtown hospitality industry and an update. We're going to just give it a minute or so for a few more people to dial in, and then we'll get going with our program. So thanks again for joining us. We'll be right back at it here in a second. All right. Well, again, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Steve Kramer. I'm the President and CEO of the Minneapolis Downtown Council, and thanks for tuning in to this update on the downtown hospitality sector. If you'd like to introduce yourself in the chat room, then we'll know who's in the audience. But again, thanks for joining us. We've got a great topic and an excellent panel of industry leaders to talk us through where this critically important sector of our downtown economy is at and where it's heading. So very much looking forward to that. Just with respect to other things downtown, obviously a lot going on. We're doing our best here at the Downtown Council to stay in touch with our employers, to keep a finger on the pulse of their back to office planning. Clearly, public safety is always a concern and certainly is today. And so we continue to work very closely with a wide range of partners to address those issues as well. Hoping to really have a positive trajectory through the fall, leading into what we all hope and believe will be a positive spring of 2021 to get our downtown back on a solid footing and looking forward to a bright future. So thanks to all of you for being a part of that. And certainly to our subject today, the hospitality sector is such a vital part of the downtown economy, and we're going to be hearing from all aspects of that sector today. Again, just kind of where things are at today and a little bit of a look into the future. So very much looking forward to that conversation. I'm going to turn it over now to Mary Beth Weisberg, our membership director. She's got a few logistical details. Then I'll make a couple of announcements and we'll get into the program. So Mary Beth, take it away.
Great, thanks, Steve. And hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We have quite a large group with us today. Around 100 people are planning to join us, so people are starting to get logged in here. Before we get started, I did want to go through a few housekeeping items. First, as we know, we're all at the mercy of our Wi-Fi connections and technology, so we appreciate any patience that you have to show us if we should have any technical difficulties. But the conversation is being recorded and it'll be posted to our YouTube channel, and we'll send out a link to anybody who registered and attended. So we'll also be happy to have you share that as well. As we kick off the program, please, again, feel free to introduce yourself with your name and company in the chat. If you have questions that you would like answered by the panelists at the end of the presentation, please use the Q&A function. We'll answer as many of your questions as possible at the end of the program. Now back to Steve, who will share information about some upcoming programs that we have.
Super, thanks Mary Beth. So we do have a couple more that we wanted to let you know about. We'll certainly have programs through the end of the year, but a couple are scheduled now. September 17th, we'll be doing a joint event with our partners at the East Town Business Partnership to get an update on public realm construction projects, how they're progressing. That's one constant downtown, COVID notwithstanding. We've seen a lot of construction going on and a lot more to come. So this will be a good opportunity to get an update on how those various projects, Hennepin Avenue, Third Avenue Bridge, I-35, et cetera, are coming along. It's important to maintain our infrastructure, and these projects are taking great shape. And then on September 22nd, we're going to continue a series of conversations on the theme of racial equity and bringing our community together. And the topic here is the journey of cultural competency. a really excellent panel that will provide a toolbox of known pathways and processes that help all of us who are leaders to become more culturally competent. So hopefully you can tune into one or both of those programs, and keep an eye on our website, mplsdowntown.com, for not only registration details about these programs, but programs through the balance of the year. Now, on to today's topic. We've got, as I said earlier, just an outstanding panel, and let me just mention all of them, and then I'll introduce each of them person by person to give some introductory remarks. We have with us today Lauren Bennett McGinty, who is the Executive Director of the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. Rick Bertram, who's a General Manager at the Minneapolis Marriott City Center and also Chairman or President of the Downtown Hotel Association. Liz Rammer, who's the President and CEO of Hospitality Minnesota. Steve Hark, Chief Executive Officer and Founder of the Entourage Events Group. And Hugh Lombardi, who is General Manager at Target Center. And behind the scenes, Dana Grady, our colleague, is kind of running the logistics of the program. So Hugh, we're going to turn to you first. And if you wouldn't mind giving us a little bit of an update about both Target Center and how the professional sports and large scale venue world looks now and into the future. Thanks for being with us this morning.
All right. Thank you very much, Steve. And good morning, everyone. I think I'd like to go back to March. You know, it's pretty incredible. It's going to be 6 months this week that we had our last event, which was Disney on Ice. We were in the middle of a run, and I think we were one of the last events actually to cancel. And since that time, like everybody else's business, it's been pretty devastating. You know, I was thinking about this morning. This was our 30th anniversary. First Avenue's their 50th anniversary. I think Excel's their 20th. Fillmore was opening up. It was going to be, you know, kind of a year of celebration, and it's been nothing but that. And it's been tough. You know, I think we've all, you know, had new vocabulary, and one of the words I think we use a lot is mitigation. And you know, quickly we had to do a lot of mitigating at the venue. Just to give you an update, we have about 47 full-time employees. We've had to unfortunately lay off 7. There's only 6 people that are actually working full-time, and that's all our security folks. And the rest of us are either 50% off or 100% on furlough. So it's and that's because we don't see anything happening the rest of the year. And you know, right away we lost nine home games to the Wolves. We lost the Lynx season. We had probably about 15 concerts on the docket for the rest of the year that we lost, that we've moved into 21, and a few other events that were gonna be big for the city as well as us. High school basketball being another one. We had a restaurant called Cargo that was on the way to the Target field that actually not only closed but went bankrupt. So we've got to replace that at some point. So it's been tough, like for everyone, with the mitigation, but we still have to keep the building alive, and so we still have a lot of bills, utility bills, and we're doing everything we can to keep that building in good shape. So when we do reopen, we'll be ready to go. We just don't know what that's going to look like as far as back to normal, and that still is a lot of questions going on there. Fortunately or unfortunately, we're going to be the last ones to open up sports-wise. We're still waiting on the NBA to decide what they're going to do. I think there was a leader in our community and there's been many leaders in our community, but the Saints obviously have opened up. They had a few games and they did a great job. They've kind of led the way, really kind of from the outset. But you know, I think in late April, we were all getting together, all the sports teams and the venues, and started talking to the governor's office. You know, that was led by the sports teams' presidents. And subsequently from that, Ethan Casson from the Timberwolves and Andrew Miller from the Vikings became co-chairs of something that we call Minnesota Safe Sports Venue and Events. And it was really, it was a great collaboration. You know, out of that, we've got everybody together from all the major venues. When I say major, the US Bank, ourselves, Target Field, University of Minnesota, Excel, the Saints, and I apologize, I'm leaving somebody else out, but we all got together and created 8 subcommittees that really took us from door to door, from how we're going to treat people coming in, what protocols are we going to now have to use as far as getting people into the building, how are we going to clean the building, how are we going to exit the building, how are we going to food service food wise. And again, I go back to the Saints, a lot of things they did, we looked at, and of course they were part of that ongoing subcommittees. And the subcommittees was a great thing because we had probably over 50 people in those organizations working together, which never happens. I've been in other cities, and maybe it is happening now, but the work that everybody did together was phenomenal from my point of view. I mean, we really opened up things that we would not talk about. There's competition, in sports and venues, but that all went away. And we've been talking on a weekly basis, and still committees are still talking, even though we've come up with a guide that we've now delivered to the governor's office to take a look at. So it's been really, a bright spot probably for all of us. I think that we've worked so well together and opened up those communications like never before. And that's one thing I think probably all of us, we're in task force mode. I'm on 3 different task forces, 2 with my own company. We created something called Venue Shield, which is the same type of thing that we've developed here, just trying to deal with how our new protocols, what are we going to look like when we come back? And so that's something, and our company, ASM Global, also runs US Bank and also the Civic Center, the Mayo Civic Center down in Rochester. So we've learned a lot. Our company has already opened up things. You probably noticed that UFC played in Jacksonville. The Louisville Football Club has started playing. And then also Sioux Falls hosted the PBR, all to a great success. So we've learned a lot. The NBA, of course, has had us on a lot of different task force. We're still waiting. And I think that's when we're going to open up, whenever the NBA opens up. And of course, they're in a bubble now. They've pushed back the draft, which could affect when the season starts. So at one time, the season hopefully was going to start December 1st. Looks probably later than that, maybe even into the first quarter. And going into next year, I am hopeful. I think the league will get back on its feet, and I think a lot of things will follow. Our concert industry probably is going to start, late spring, early summer, and really have a jam-packed year, I think. So we're hopeful that business will get back to normal, and we haven't stopped working. We've bid on the Big Ten championships from 23 to 29, working with Sports Minneapolis. As well as we've already bid on the NCAA. Next year, we do have the men's regional in 21 in March. So we're getting ready. We've got some capital improvements. So business is still active. We're getting ready for 21. So.
Great. Thank you, Hugh. That's helpful. And I think your point about these times forging different and new types of working relationships is probably something we're going to hear across the panel, so maybe we can come back and explore that a little bit at the end if we have some time. So thank you. Steve Hart, live events, venues like the Armory and others that you program, how are things looking from your vantage point? Can we hear Steve?
Good morning, Steve. You can hear me now?
There we go. We sure can. Thanks, Steve.
Good morning. I'm pleased to be here today. A lot to share, a lot of updates, a lot of changes. I'd like to share with you a lot of things that we have done, we plan on doing. A lot of events we handle as a company, from weddings to conferences, corporate events, what has rescheduled, what has not rescheduled. Hosting events currently was Stay Safe Minnesota guidelines. How do events look today that we are hosting weekly? How we're handling a muted business climate, how we're staging for the new normal. A lot of things to share with the group today. If we look at the next slide. The next one. Great, thank you. I'll start talking about weddings. We handle a lot of weddings. It's an important event for a lot of people in our community. And most of the weddings have not been canceled. It's mostly has been rescheduled. So we rescheduled most of the weddings that we had on our calendar for the last 3 months. We're actively seeing an increase in touring our venues by couples that are booking their weddings for 2021 and 2022, which is really encouraging to see that. Other social events and nonprofits events and galas are rescheduling into 2021. As we all know, nonprofits and galas are important fundraising events, and they need them to happen. They're crucial for funding their years, and then we're seeing them rescheduled for 2021. We're also seeing the near-term bookings we're doing with a smaller guest count. All that is happening at this time. Next slide, we can talk about corporate events. And corporate events, mostly cancellations, which are obvious because the financials go past this fiscal year. So we expect these events to rebook at a later date. Conferences as well, most of them are postponed. No dates have been confirmed yet for future conferences. The earliest future conference we have confirmed is in late summer, early fall 2021. It's a national conference, so we're excited to see that a year from now we might be going back to normal. And new awareness to the perception of safety in downtown Minneapolis, including the possibility of a curfew, has been coming up the last few weeks with a lot of our clients that do consider Minneapolis as a destination for a conference or for their events. So that has been a topic, has been a question: how do we handle if a curfew takes place and an event is scheduled on that date? So something to bring up as well has been a topic. For concert and entertainment, what I can speak of what we're seeing at the Armory and the music venues that we are involved with, of course, there'll be no concerts for the rest of the year. Most of them are planning to reschedule in 2021. So the 2021 schedule, as you mentioned, it's going to be strong. However, confirming the concert dates and the ticket release is still on hold, pending the ability to host concerts safely from the public health side of things and legally, allowing it to happen at what capacity? Is it a full capacity, a reduced capacity, 50%? There's still a lot of unknowns, so we're seeing the touring bands are not confirming dates yet or releasing tickets. If you haven't attended an event recently, we are hosting events. We are hosting events with 3 main messages: mask, sanitize, and social distance. We're putting informational signage and reminder throughout the venues. We're staging each venue to be appropriately socially distant by the table settings, table spacing, setups, and a masked team facilitate a curated socially distant event. We have seen, we utilize our outdoor urban garden patios more than before. That's a great option to have. If you have a venue and outdoor patio, definitely being used when we're hosting events currently. And you can see some of the images on the side of some of the events we recently hosted, some of the setups as well. Next slide. One of the largest hospitality employers in downtown Minneapolis, internally, we have been trying to stay positive. We're keeping a positive environment during those challenging times. We're coaching our team to stay, to see the glass half full, not half empty. We are staying positive. We have an amazing positive team. We're looking, we're seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, I should say. We are reconfiguring business operations, market approach, pricing structures. We're developing new protocols, new products and services, contract language. A lot of new terms needs to start being included in the contracts that were not in the past. For example, a pandemic, the word pandemic now, you would expect to see that in every contract and every legal document, and how you handle a pandemic moving forward. Next slide. And on the client side, I would like to say that we are in contact and communication with our clients on a regular basis, even though we're not hosting events or we're not planning events for them. But we are, educating clients, sharing with them updates, and hand-holding them through a time of so many unknowns that keep changing on them, and a lot of questions come up. Some of the questions we know the answers, and some of them we don't. However, we're staying abreast internationally, nationally, regionally, and locally via entities, association, and professional networks, and we're watching different markets, different countries, how they're opening up, how they're hosting their events, what they're doing, what they're changing. So it's a learning experience daily, and we're educating our staff and our team and what can be utilized in this market, and how we can implement some of the new procedures. Next slide. Next slide is a message, and then Hugh touched on it, and it's definitely for our hospitality community. We need to come together, forget about the competition of business, and join forces to help each other navigate through these difficult times. I encourage each one of us to work with Steve and the Downtown Council team to get the world excited to come to Minneapolis again. We love Minneapolis. This is an amazing world-class city, and we want to get back to welcome a lot of visitors from out of state and internationally to Minneapolis and host them for events. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. That's a great upbeat message to end with, and I'm sure we'll revisit that question of how we all work together to kind of get things reanimated here as time goes on. So let's turn next to the hotel sector. Rick Bertram, General Manager of the Marriott, as I said, and President of the Hotel Association. Can you give us a little bit of an update?
Absolutely. Thank you, Steve. As you all know, and hearing through the speakers, hospitality has been affected fairly dramatically through this pandemic. I've got a few slides here, and we'll go to the next slide. And first of all, thank you to Meet Minneapolis. They've done a phenomenal job of helping us kind of manage the statistics and understand statistically and through those numbers what's happening in the market. This is a little bit of an exercise as you look at this chart. The main one to look at is that dark blue line that goes up and down through the middle. That's the occupancy. So if you look at the far left-hand side, you see occupancy in March, where we were doing fairly well. You can see when the pandemic hit and it dropped to basically almost nothing. And then you see as it kind of starts to move up, and honestly, it looks like an EKG, which I think is a very positive thing because that means our heart's still beating, quite honestly. But you see those little peaks in there, those are the weekends. And that's where we're seeing the majority of the business. Weekday starts to quiet down a little bit because we don't have the business traveler. But the weekend starts to pick up a little bit as we do get leisure travelers coming in Minneapolis, just looking for an escape or just to do something different and get out of the house. So you see so far this year, it starts to tick up, but we've been hitting occupancies of right around 16 to 18%, where this time of year, usually we're in the 80s to low 90% occupancy. And the next slide you see here, this shows kind of the whole metro area with the top line, the dark blue line being the North Metro. You see St. Paul with kind of the greenish line in there. The blue line is Bloomington, and then you see that dotted line is downtown Minneapolis. So you see as we break up Minneapolis, where we fall within that metro area, quite honestly. Every market within Minneapolis is slightly different. You can see that we rely fairly heavily on business travel into downtown Minneapolis. Without businesses having people working in the offices, there aren't as many people to travel here as well. So that's one of the things that probably affects us the most. If you look at Bloomington, they've got some amateur sports that's taking place out there that helps them a bit. Then you see St. Paul. You might ask why St. Paul may be doing a little bit better. We believe that the legislative sessions that are happening give them a little bit of an advantage from the occupancy there. And then the North Metro, they are not really affected by business travel or anything else, just mainly the leisure travelers. So they've sustained a little bit better than most of the other markets. And then the next slide you see here, this shows the forecasted occupancy basically through the rest of this year and then into the end of 2021. So it gives you a little bit of an outlook. And before we go to that next slide, which will give us a longer term outlook, You see that dotted line in there, and this is where we were forecasting after the first quarter. We were a little more optimistic, and then it started to settle in that we weren't going to recover as quickly as we thought we were going to. So you see that solid line at the bottom. We do see some pickup into the middle of next year. But year-end occupancy will end up in the Minneapolis area of about 26%, compared to 68% last year. So it gives you a feel for where we're landing and what's happening with our businesses here. All right, and then this final slide as far as statistics in there, this is a more long-term outlook. It shows you occupancies through 2024. So again, in 2019, we ended at about 68% occupancy. And you see that we won't get back to those occupancies until about 2024. So it will be a long-term recovery from a hotel perspective for a lot of different reasons, and understanding that people will travel and business will come back, and we'll have conventions, we will actually have events happening in downtown Minneapolis as well. Just for a little bit of perspective, and this is very similar to restaurants, for hotels, in order to just break even, you need to have occupancies somewhere between 40 and 50%. We probably see those numbers going down slightly as we kind of right size our business, quite honestly, based on the business levels. But we need closer to 50% occupancy in order to just break even. So you see, even going into next year, it'll definitely be a struggle for most hotels just to maintain any type of occupancy. All right, next slide. Let's get into a little bit of good news. So in the surveys that were done out there, they asked consumers, where do they believe some of the hot spots are for COVID-19? The good news is we don't show up anywhere on that list, which is, I think, very positive. So people don't have that in the forefront of their mind as far as a reason not to come to Twin Cities or come to Minneapolis. We have that in our favor. So what does the path forward look like for hotels? The future, quite honestly, at the moment is a little bit of a blind spot for us. Prior forecasting methods based on past customer demand, I mean, it doesn't work anymore the way that we used to forecast, quite honestly. Unlike past downturns, the current crisis is both an economic and a medical crisis. So our recovery will move through medically defined phases. And beyond the medical recovery, human movement and interactions may return, but in completely different patterns and ways. How will people travel differently in the future? So we have to change the way we look at the customer. Customer behavior and spending potential are changing dynamically across many industries and definitely hospitality. And so the key question is, which of those changes will become permanent and how long will the temporary changes last? So it's kind of understanding, it's really hard to forecast right now. We look in hotels and hospitality and we're really basing off of 2019 because that was the last solid year. And then what percentage off of 19 do we think 2021 is going to be? So from a hospitality perspective, we certainly can't change the current circumstances of the pandemic. I mean, some things we're definitely focusing on that we believe are affecting downtown Minneapolis is the perception of safety. So there's a lot of work that Steve and team have done, Meet Minneapolis, several organizations working with public officials to help change that understanding of what safety looks like, get to the grassroots of that, make the positive change, and then how do we communicate those changes out into the community, not only around us, but definitely in the 5-state area where that's the majority of our travelers are coming from, 5-state area. We need to change that perception. But from a hotel perspective, what we can do is build confidence in the traveler. And that's not an easy thing to do. People are nervous about getting out. People are nervous about traveling. They feel pretty good about jumping in a car and traveling, but not jumping into a plane and traveling. So how do we build confidence in hospitality? Certainly, I would say executing the basics brilliantly. And Steve mentioned this a little bit, and you see this everywhere you go, quite honestly. But it's social distancing, it's face coverings, it's the shields, it's hand sanitizing. In a lot of businesses, including most hotels now, is the electrostatic cleaning, which we do in off hours of all public spaces, including fitness center, similar to what many of the airlines or most of the airlines are doing. So we have to execute the basics brilliantly. I think as consumers, we all go into a retail situation, we might go into a restaurant, and we immediately judge what our experience might be based on what you see. Is there social distancing cues on the floor? Are there masks? Do you see hand sanitizer? Do you see the staff following this process? So that's table stakes, quite honestly, in hospitality. But then also it's, what are we doing in the hotel itself? And I speak for my hotel, but I can speak for the vast majority of hotels out there and the vast majority of brands, and we're all doing very similar things about how do we make sure that that guest room that you're checking into, that you have the confidence that it's been cleaned, that it's been disinfected, that all the surfaces have been cared for, so that you feel like when you go into that guest room, you're walking into your own sanctuary. And you'll see that many processes are quite honestly changing. In the vast majority of hotels, you can request housekeeping. We don't want to enter your room if you don't want us in the room. So it's kind of flipped the opposite direction, where you would automatically clean your room if you didn't ask. But now you need to request the cleaning of the room, or we'll have that conversation with you, check in to see when you'd like to leave. Because we don't want to enter the room if you don't plan us to. So a lot of things have been done. A lot of things have been removed from the guest room, some high touch items, pens and pads, things of that nature. You'll find the remotes in the guest rooms will be in a little sleeve protected for you. In our particular hotel, we've taken out coffee makers, but you can request those. So a lot of those high touch items have been removed initially. And then there's a tremendous amount of additional cleaning with different chemicals that maybe we've used in the past that we're using in the guest rooms as well. We want to make sure that you get safe in the sanctuary. Same thing with from a food and beverage perspective. And you see this in most of the restaurants that you go into already. You're looking at disposable menus, certainly everyone wearing masks, see the distancing from the tables. Similar to Steve, just a couple of weeks ago, we had our first socially distanced wedding, which was a very interesting experience. They had the ceremony in the hotel, and we had 2 sets of chairs. So they were all spaced out. And that very quickly changed as families came in and pulled chairs together so they could sit together as a family. But it was very interesting to witness. We had our plan and then watch the human dynamic within that plan, how it actually works. But you'll see within food and beverage a lot of changes. And again, most, certainly in hotels, but most of what we've seen in the restaurants. And then the final piece from a hotel perspective, certainly the meetings concept, and how do we get meetings up and running again and get people to travel again for those meetings. Definitely leveraging a lot more technology than we have in the past from a registration perspective. You'll see a lot of hybrid meetings taking place as well, so in person as well as virtual. Similar to Steve, we have a lot of events that have moved from 2020 into 2021, and those events moved as whole events. But we know in reality that if they said they're going to have 200 people for an association meeting, they probably won't, because they'll move into that hybrid model. Not quite as many people will be traveling. So the meetings experience will be a critical one as well. The meetings experience is also something that we have to reassure the person who's planning the meeting, because they take some responsibility for the people that they're inviting. So it's a much higher responsibility to make sure that's.
Rick, before you go on, I just want to note that you are one of the most nice, soft-spoken people I know, and folks are having a little hard time hearing you, so use your outside voice a bit. Thank you.
I'll get a little bit closer. Mary Beth, don't make me start all over again.
No, I won't.
You'll have to go to the recorded session and then turn up the volume on it.
Okay.
And then the last piece, and you think about hotels, and it's a lot about that customer experience and that high touch experience. That has started to evolve. It was already evolving before the pandemic hit, but it's moving that much quicker now, where the guests don't want as much connection with maybe our staff. So we're using things such as mobile check-in. We're using mobile keys, so you don't even have to come to the front desk. You can just check in online and go directly to your room and use your mobile device as your key. A lot of food ordering now is happening through QR codes. Whether it's room service, you can just order online, which before you, for the most part, had to call down. So we're using a lot more technology to deliver that experience to the guests the way they want it delivered. If they want a completely touchless experience, they can have that. If they want to interact with our staff in a safe environment, they can. So these are just some of the items that we're working on to build confidence in the traveler so that they feel comfortable when they come back into it.
Great. Rick, thank you. That was a very comprehensive presentation, so thank you for putting that together. Liz, thanks for joining us. You've got a statewide perspective on this industry, and you've also, without a doubt, been kind of the point of the spear for the public policy aspect of this, or the interface with government. I know you've got a lot of fans on this call for your work that you've done there, and I also know you're fresh off a call with Commissioner Grove, so maybe you could break a little news for us. But anyway, welcome, and look forward to your comments.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Steve. Appreciate the invitation to join you today. And yeah, it's been never the same day twice for all of us, right? As we walk into our office with the idea of what we're going to do, and then everything changes. So no, it's great to be with you. And to that end, Hospitality Minnesota, actually, we thought there would be nothing to do. So we decided we would merge 3 organizations and do that in the midst of a pandemic. So we actually became one organization as of April 1st this year. And so actually it was just in the nick of time, because previously we had under our umbrella 3 different trade associations for different sectors within hospitality, as well as our education foundation, which helps produce training education in high schools throughout our state for people interested at the junior and senior level in high school for culinary arts and hospitality tourism management programs. And we're in over 70 high schools for that. And so it was just a wonderful opportunity for us to bring all of that truly under one umbrella. And now it could not have happened at a better time, given all that's gone on here. And the focus that we have in Minneapolis with the different businesses that we support, as well as throughout our state, as we look at the lodging, all aspects of lodging, which includes B&Bs and all the different aspects of that within event venues, as well as resorts, campgrounds, catering companies, attractions, restaurants, and food service. So we have a pretty large umbrella with over 2,000 locations that we support. So again, it's been a challenging time for this industry, and the challenges are different depending on the type of business model as well as the location through our state. So we have been hard at work advocating on all of these different aspects, and you know, it's truly a challenging time. You know, you may have seen news reports in the last couple of days with this advent of cold weather, a lot of question mark and concerns about what this is going to portend for our businesses, especially those in the food service industry that have been reliant on outdoor patio seating. And certainly the last couple of days hasn't been very friendly for people wanting to be under an umbrella and sitting outside. I know I had to put on my closed-toed shoes for the first time. And so again, we just need to be really mindful of what that's going to mean for our businesses. And to that end, we've been really following the data from the Department of Health and working with Governor Walz and Commissioner Steve Grove from DEED. As Steve Kramer mentioned, we were just on a hospitality roundtable meeting with Commissioner Grove and also Chris Schmitter, who is the Chief of Staff for the Governor. Last week, Hospitality Minnesota sent a letter to the Governor urging him to help us make the next move in moving the dials. As we knew that we would be entering this fall and winter season, and this is critical that we have some more capacity for event venues and food service, and also recognizing the curtailment of leisure travel for our lodging partners. And this is all going to impact us, and we really know that we are at the cliff for some of these businesses to be able to stay afloat. The PPP money is becoming exhausted for those that were able to access that, the EIDL loans and all the other sorts of support also from our state of Minnesota. And we've heard directly from our operators, they are staring at a cliff and they can't see how they're going to be able to survive through the lean winter months. And we all know in Minnesota, it's not going to get warmer until about April. So we are doing our best to make sure that we're advocating with our partners in all aspects. And my colleague Lauren here from the Craft Brewers Guild, as well as Tony Chezik from the Minnesota Licensed Beverage Association, and many, many others as we work with the Chamber and lots of groups to really come together to be thoughtful, resourceful, and reasonable about what we can do to make the next step in making sure our businesses are safe for employees, safe for the patrons, and making sure that we have every flexibility in mind to be able to stay within the confines of social distancing, but increase those capacities. And so that's really what we've been asking of the governor is, help us make that next turn of the dial, however that looks, looking at increasing event capacities, because you've heard from Hugh and Steve today about the challenges with events and the capacity limits and the inability to look ahead in the future to know when we're going to be able to offer those opportunities for the entertainment that we're all used to, and to be able to have events of weddings and reunions and those kinds of things that all these venues also within our lodging partners offer. So those are some of the challenges that we're looking at, and we're certainly hopeful that also comes with this a tone that is a consumer confidence building. As Rick mentioned, you know, people look to see what they encounter when they enter a building and an operation, and assess whether or not it's a safe atmosphere for them. And we want to make sure that everyone is helping to assure people that it's safe to go inside, and we'd much rather have them go into our highly regulated businesses than to try to convene some sort of event in their backyard where there is no regulation. And so these are some of the things, again, that as we've been talking with the governor and his staff, we want to make sure that they're helping us communicate to the public that this is a safe endeavor, and encourage those that are interested in dining out, you know, that they can feel safe about going inside now instead of just patio. You know, we've conducted several surveys of our members and others throughout this crisis, and even as of last month, we know that those that responded in our midst said that their business is still down 50% or more, and over 65% said they're going to need more help from the government to stay afloat. And that can be in any form, financial or other, but certainly, you know, some things I just talked about are going to also help them to manage through these lean fall and winter months. You know, so it is challenging. We do see, again, the business models and where they're located. The metro cores have been, you know, more significantly impacted, as you've heard from the prior speakers, than maybe some of the greater Minnesota areas in terms of especially leisure travel this summer. And as we kind of turn to the positivity aspect of all this and how we can have some optimism, you know, I think we've all identified that there's been a lot of innovation and a lot of new creativity as businesses have been really forced to think about their business model and how they can best flex and adapt with this new world. And to that end, I think, you know, we've been seeing some interesting new adaptations and people making adjustments to tackle not just the present situation, but what they anticipate will be more of a go forward best practices. This is probably not going to change anytime soon. But again, I think some of the silver lining that we've seen is, as you consider, let's go greater Minnesota for a second. You know, we've seen some of the folks that have been enjoying greater Minnesota as a social distancing that comes naturally from being in the great outdoors. And we've heard from many of our operators in the resorts and campground area that while they had a huge number of cancellations in the early spring because they weren't open and they weren't sure when or if they'd be able to open at all, those cancellations from families that were used to coming year over year and had members coming from many states or for events, they canceled. But after things started to open up, those cancellations started to fill in with new guests. And so there is a silver lining here that people who have never been to some of these areas of our state have now been exposed to those, and hopefully they have some neat new family traditions, and this will in turn be something that these businesses can count on in future years, and maybe even push into the shoulder season, which again for the resorts in particular is always a challenge to get people to come up, you know, after the fall colors are done and into the October timeframe sort of thing. And then as we think about some of the other plays in terms of innovation that we've seen early, kind of in the middle of the crisis, I know our hotel partners and lodging partners were starting to think creatively about, they have a restaurant on site, what can they do to encourage people to dine in? And so some really were creative in positioning their food service as a private dining room in a hotel room. So, and kind of like room service, but brought to a separate room, all sterilized, sanitized, and the food is dropped off, and then the family can go dine in private in that kind of a setting. So that was a neat new package that some of our members were looking at to, again, get people to think about how they could still enjoy the same experience of being away and being served, but in a safe atmosphere. We've also seen some new ideas as we think about the fall and winter with restaurants and some hotel partners who are looking at, I'll call them little igloos and individual pods that people can go into and dine separately. Maybe they're a yurt, I don't know. But again, it's kind of a cool idea to help people again extend into the fall season and enjoy that outdoor dining in a safe manner and a kind of a fun new venue. We've also seen reports of resorts offering, now that kids are back in school, you don't have to be at home to be online. So this again can lean into that whole shoulder season opportunity and how kids can actually be kind of on vacation in a way at a resort, but still be online. And also the parents can take advantage of having, you know, a separate area with great Wi-Fi that they can conduct their business. So those are some other silver lining things that we see.
Great.
And then we also know that there's some restaurants that have invested in HVAC and ionization and other new kinds of sterilization procedures, such as you've been seeing on the airlines, that help improve their HVAC air circulation so that they can encourage, again, that customer confidence that this is a safe place to come indoor and dine. And then, you know, lastly, you know, I think we've seen some of the other, you know, off-site takeout, you know, meal kits and those kinds of things that started early on in the pandemic. And we've also seen some interesting new partnerships with some of our operators who have a unique kind of product or in some cases a sauce that they can bottle with a local partner and sell that off-site. As well as now, you know, things like alcohol to go and those kinds of things that came along to help augment some of the lost revenue. So, you know, again, we know there's a lot of challenges ahead, a lot of, you know, big headwinds, but certainly, you know, I think that hospitality is all about being resourceful, resilient, and at the end of the day, making sure the customer has a great experience. And this industry is extremely interested in making sure that customers are well taken care of, and employees as part of that as well. And this is part of the culture. And that is what hospitality is all about. And so as we look to the future, what we can do to be a good partner and making sure that we're doing everything we can to keep these businesses in business, as we know that so many of them are small businesses and this is their livelihood. And we, you know, are doing, again, everything we can to make sure that they have the resources that will keep them not just successful, you know, but ultimately thrive, as we know this is going to be a pretty long tail and will not, you know, be back to 100% restoration anytime soon.
Great, thank you. That's terrific. Great overview. Thanks. And kind of our last speaker reflects one of those key kind of interesting parts of the overall industry. Great national, international renowned Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. Lauren Bennett McGinney, why don't you wrap us up here, and then we'll see if we have time for a few questions. But thanks for joining us, Lauren.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah.
So Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild, just really quick background. We have 160 members in the state of Minnesota, and there are just under 200 breweries in the state of Minnesota. In Minneapolis alone, it's our largest area of breweries. We have 30 breweries in Minneapolis, and then in downtown, there are about 12. Kind of define how you define downtown. Maybe change that a little bit. And if we were a little bit later in the day, I'd tell everybody to crack a local beverage while we get into this. But, you know, we can wait a little bit
Almost
later.
noon. It's getting close.
So, you know, Liz has kind of hit on a lot of points that the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild has gone through. And I've been so fortunate to be able to work with her on a lot of the hospitality industry things. You know, we kind of sit in similar camps, and I think that a lot of the needs are very similar across the board for us. So I won't spend too much time talking about some of the same things that she mentioned, but I will say that, you know, Minnesota has some really odd beer laws, and of course we work every year to try to change those. But unfortunately, when we had approached the legislature for some temporary relief early on in the COVID crisis, we did not get any movement there. You know, we had asked for tax relief, lease relief, a lot of other kinds of things financially that would support them. But additionally, we had asked for the ability for them to be able to sell a 6-pack to go, similar to what restaurants were able to do, and we were denied that option. And so breweries, when they were shut down, they kind of got hit with a 1-2 punch. They had a lot of beer sitting out in the marketplace that couldn't be sold because they really rely on those on-premise accounts out in the marketplace. So when you look at a place like downtown, you have a lot of breweries who are distributing to local bars and restaurants, and with the shutdown of their tap room and those local bars and restaurants, they really had to hope that people would either buy their products in a liquor store, which not all of them distribute to, or buy those crowlers and growlers in-house. And so that was a really difficult shift for a lot of them to make, because they might not have had all the materials that they needed to kind of really ramp up that production. And they really had to change their production to be able to put it all into growlers instead of kegs and send it out into the marketplace. So we saw a lot of challenges there. Luckily, early on, the AGED, the Alcohol and Gambling Enforcement Department, gave us the go-ahead to do curbside pickup and delivery, which was awesome for a lot of breweries in the state to be able to accommodate people that way. And it was a very safe way for them to accommodate. And there were certainly a lot of innovative ways in which people approach that problem as well. And so kind of moving on, we of course surveyed our membership, just like Liz mentioned that she did. And we saw that in downtown, 72 to 100% of people's part-time employees were furloughed, and then another 27% of full-time staff were furloughed or laid off. So we saw those big hikes because they weren't needing as many people to operate the tap room. Of course, brewery staff also got laid off because they probably cut way back on their production. In fact, almost every single brewery in the state had indicated that they had to cut back on their production. I think, you know, that's something where you're a manufacturer and you're kind of a bar, you have to really accommodate how much is going out to all those different places, as well as your own tap room. And so it's a really big challenge to reconfigure that production schedule. As we kind of moved more into the opening time period, I think consumer confidence, like Liz has mentioned in both publicly and in this webinar, is a really key component. Early on, I think there was that kind of immediate influx of folks who just wanted to get out of the house, and I don't blame them. So sitting on a patio is ideal. A lot of breweries, luckily, especially in Minneapolis, have that big warehouse space, or they have kind of a bigger parking lot that they can expand into. City officials have been great in allowing those kind of extra expansions. Fulton was able to open their new tap room, and they have that nice big patio now as well. I know that they've been working on that for quite some time, so I'm glad that they got to utilize it while it's still warm out. You know, taking advantage of that was really great, but some challenges obviously arose with that too, spending more money on PPE, and being able to kind of reconfigure your spaces to allow for that distancing. If you had an indoor only space, you really had to rethink how that operated. And I will say that most breweries who had an indoor space were nowhere near 50% when they configured it to do distancing. And they're all very safe. I will say that breweries, probably more so than a lot of other places, really practice heavy sanitization because it's part of the brewing process. So I think having the knowledge as to how to sanitize all of your products to be able to be used in a food product, and then translating that into visitor spaces went really well for a lot of them. One thing that a lot of them just kind of had some immediate issues with was reservations. It's not at all a part of the tap room atmosphere, the brewery atmosphere. And it was a really interesting thing to see how all the breweries were communicating that with one another. Like, do you do it online? Do you do call? Do you do walk up? And it was just one of those things where I think that that took a little bit more time to adjust. And I don't see that being a post-COVID thing that sticks around. I think a lot of breweries don't really care for that model. I think it kind of is a prohibitive activity that really keeps from a lot of people from gathering. And of course, it's very important right now, and I recognize that, but I don't know that that's something that will carry through. I do think that the sanitization and kind of the way that they have set up their ordering process might carry through for a lot of folks, especially in the more immediate future. Consumer confidence is so key when we open back up. And even if there is a vaccine, I don't know that people will be super trustworthy still of other people not knowing if they've had the vaccine, or bars, restaurants, breweries, to be able to know if it's safe to go in. So I think that these kind of social distancing practices maybe not at that 6 foot of distance, but at some distance, or the way that they manage their ordering process will definitely remain in effect. I think a lot more breweries are going to enter distribution if they're able. We saw that a lot with the shutdown period. They were able to kind of go into self-distribution, whether that was through crowlers or some for the first time canned their beer in 12 and 16 ounce cans to be able to sell in a liquor store. And I think we're going to see a lot more people exploring that option, even though it is quite expensive. It will hopefully get them through a very long winter. I know we don't have tons of time left, so I'm going to kind of skip to the end, but I think, again, you know, there's a lot of expenses that come with this, but I think safety is first, and to kind of hit on all of the things that everybody else has been saying so far. You know, these establishments work really, really hard to keep people safe and manage that distancing. And I think consumer confidence is so key, rather than, you know, maybe having this rumor that outbreaks are always occurring at these places, and then instead people go to their backyards and throw a party where there's no social distancing. I think having that safe atmosphere, whether it's out on a patio or indoors, is just so essential to having a safe but fun time. And, you know, Liz had mentioned some filtration systems that people are investing in, and I see that as well with some breweries, but most of them probably can't afford it. So I think they will just do their best to make sure everything remains clean and distant, and that people feel good going to their establishments.
Super. Thank you, Lauren. Very helpful. Well, maybe we could leave our audience with, we'll just kind of do a lightning round here and just go one by one, and kind of what is your top advocacy priority, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level, because everybody's working hard, but all of us are going to need some help from our policy partners at the local, state, and federal level to kind of move over the line here. So maybe, Hugh, if I could start with you, and we'll just go right in the order of speakers. Do you have one kind of policy priority at any level of government that you'd like to mention quickly? Hugh, you still with us?
Hugh's with us. You just need to unmute.
Okay,
Here I am. Sorry about that.
there we go. Yep.
Well, there's various things, but I think, you know, we need some direction, obviously, from local government as far as how many people we can eventually have in the building. You know, when does that happen? You know, and one thing I'm certain about is nobody's certain about anything. So I don't know when that will happen. You know, it depends a lot on the NBA as well. So.
Yeah, great. Thanks. Steve, how about you?
Steve, I think we need help from different levels, especially on a federal level. I think the industry is in need more than any other industry for support from the federal government. As Liz said, PPP funds, it was not enough help to our industry. Maybe to other industries was enough help, but for the hospitality industry, I think there has to be something brought in to the music venues, sports venues, caterers. I think that industry needs extra attention from all parties.
Well, I think our home state Senator Amy Klobuchar is a key sponsor of a federal legislation to help independent venues, as I recall. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that Congress can kind of get its act together.
Correct.
Yes. Rick, how about the hotel industry?
Steve, I would say from a local perspective, it's definitely safety in downtown Minneapolis. That's the ultimate priority for us. And then from a state perspective, it's working with the Department of Economic Development, like many have already, and getting those occupancies changed. Right now, it's at 250 people or 25%. There are a lot of venues that could handle more people than that and still practice social distancing. So we need to work through that fairly quickly.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Rick. Liz?
So yeah, to pick up on the theme here, I would tag on to what Rick said. That is the focus of our conversation in our prior call with the governor's staff, and that is to let people move up to a higher occupancy within the confines of the current protocols as quickly as possible. So that's going to be continuing a conversation that includes event venues as well as party sizes at tables. So that's kind of on the local level. On the federal level, we're very involved with the PPP and all the other national legislation, and we're behind that effort on the second go round. And to tag on to what Steve said, this is critical. This PPP money, as I noted earlier, is about exhausted, and people are looking to figure out how in the world they're going to make it. And you know, it isn't just about staff, it's about all the lost revenue and all the obligations that are continuing. So how can we help mitigate that and get this important industry that is 1 in 10 Minnesota jobs?
Yep.
And so we want to get these people and keep them on their employer's payroll and not the state of Minnesota unemployment payroll. So those are very key aspects of how we're going to be navigating forward.
Great, thank you. And Lauren will give you the last word.
Great. Yeah, so I am in a similar camp to everybody else here. The PPP, selfishly, we are a 501c6 nonprofit, so we haven't been able to receive that money, which has been really challenging for sure. A lot of breweries are already in debt because brewing is not the cheapest business to operate. So a lot of them, you know, didn't get as much money as they needed from PPP or didn't apply for a disaster loan. So I think any sort of relief that doesn't require significant debt would be very helpful. And we've been working on the federal level with that as well. Locally, having taxes and some fees relieved over the next couple months would be phenomenal. And then also nationally, a little bit different than everybody else, we've been working with the Brewers Association to pass a tax excise relief permanently. So we've had this for the last couple years, and the tax per barrel is $7, and then it's a lot of money. And so a few years ago, it got cut in half to $3.50. And so now we're hoping to make that permanent. If it does jump back up at the end of the year and isn't passed, it's going to be one more nail in the coffin, I think, for a lot of people. So we've been working on that nationally as well.
Great, thank you. Well, to all the panelists, thank you for a really informative and engaging conversation. I learned a lot, so thank you very much. And to our audience, thanks for tuning in today. You can see this on our YouTube channel at the Minneapolis Downtown Council. So take advantage of going back and listening to this really informative information. And you'll also see future notifications of programs like this. So thanks again to the panelists and everyone who tuned in, and have a great, safe afternoon. Thanks so much.